Loud and Quiet presents Midnight Chats.
Evening everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Midnight Chats. Not just a new episode, but a sneaky bonus episode. Regular listeners will know that we put one of these out at midnight on a Thursday every fortnight. But, well, we were feeling generous, so we've thrown in an extra one. Think of it as a late Christmas present or something. Last week was Stuart's conversation with Welsh artist Gwenno. Check that one out if you haven't already. Fascinating hearing about her experience of leaving home at 17, leaving Cardiff and going to Vegas to star in Michael Flatley's Lord of the Dance, amongst other things. Some great stories from Gwenno, so do check that one out. We will have another podcast next week as well, so loads of Midnight Chats for you at the moment. But on to my guest tonight, someone who has seen a lot of life, as they say. Back in the late 90s, Fischerspooner, an artist and photography assistant at the time, got together with the classically trained songwriter Warren Fisher in New York and formed the art-pop duo Fischerspooner. Unbelievably, that's 2 decades ago now, and as Casey says in the conversation you're about to hear, it was never designed as a career band. The group was supposed to be this conceptual, outlandish, of-the-moment electro-clash project that was deliberately timed with the turn of the millennium and all of the hedonism and the hysteria that accompanied that weird period. Fischerspooner famously played their first show in a Starbucks in the East Village and were signed by the label Ministry of Sound for a fee that at the time was rumoured to be around £1 million. Now, you've got to remember this was happening in an era when the newly connected world was getting very excited about the New York indie rock scene. The Strokes, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Interpol. Fischerspooner were the flamboyant alternative to all that, both in the way they looked and the way they sounded, with tracks like Emerge and their debut album Number One. So it's easy to forget their influence too on the likes of Scissor Sisters a few years later, and then much later the likes of Lady Gaga and Katy Perry. 2 albums came after Number One, Odyssey in 2005 and 2009's Entertainment. That album in particular struggled to make an impact, and Casey goes into the reasons for that. But there is a new album, it's called Sir, and it's out now, and while it's taken almost a decade, there is good reason for that, all of which Casey goes into. It's kind of extraordinary what's happened in between this and their last release. Interestingly as well, Sir is produced by Michael Stipe, formerly of R.E.M, of course, but on a personal level, he was Casey's first boyfriend, his first gay relationship. So he talks about that and what it was like going to Michael's studio in Athens, Georgia, to make the album during a period where a lot of other things in his life were not necessarily going to plan. So for all of the delays and the challenges though, it does feel like all of that happened for a reason, and I got the impression that this is very much the beginning of a new chapter. Thank you again to Casey. He was great company, really entertaining. When he arrived for our conversation, he was wearing a spectacular bushy coat and some very cool aviators, great moustache as well. An amazing life, an amazing character. This is Casey from Fischerspooner on Midnight Chats. Casey, welcome to our Midnight Chats podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. You've pretty much just got into London, cold old London.
I did. I just got in last night.
Am I right in thinking it was your birthday a couple of days ago?
It was my birthday on Friday,
Okay.
February 2nd.
And
Yeah.
how did you celebrate?
Oh my God. I had an incredible birthday. It started on Thursday night at midnight. I was at this little bar called La Perle in Paris and just had some drinks, hung out, got a great birthday kiss. It was a blue moon. My day started super early. Lots of phone calls, lots of friends. Went to the Ezzedine Alaya show, which was incredible, with a friend of mine, Jerome. And then I had there was a photographer I met at the bar the night before, and we did a photo shoot in the afternoon. So we did this great, fun photo shoot. One of the photos just went live on Vogue.com today, 3 days later. And then had an amazing dinner, this really cool little brasserie down by the river. And then I went to this cabaret in Paris that I love called the Manco, and had birthday cake and drank way too much vodka and, ran home and passed out at 4 a.m.
I was going to say, what time did all that finish? Sounds
Yeah,
like a great
4,
birthday.
and people wanted to keep going, and I was like, and then I recovered a little bit on Saturday and went to my favorite cafe in my neighborhood, Le Progrès, and had a croque madame. And then I went to the Cartier Foundation and saw the Malik Sidibe show.
I mean, you've just recently moved to Paris from New York.
Yes.
So was part of the attraction of moving to Paris just all of the cultural options, being able to kind of dip in to see things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in Paris, I'm constantly seeing art and around culture and music, and, it's such a beautiful city, and it has such a long history of culture that I didn't plan to go see the Alaya show. I just ran into a friend, and then all of a sudden I'm in this like beautiful exhibition. And then I had been trying to go to the Malik Sidibe show for a long time because I love the Cartier Foundation. They've done a lot of great shows over the years that I love. I went to Paris, and I've never felt like I've been able to see everything. And now even living there, I'm constantly, I've missed the Forsyth show. I got the Irving Penn show in. I still haven't been to the, oh my God, what's the museum? Gustave Moreau. It's one of my favorite painters. And he has a museum that I didn't even know about. And I finally made it to the Rodin Museum, but it was during the Dior ball, so I kind of have to go back. So there's it's
You've
constant.
got a busy diary.
I got a lot. And I made it to Père Lachaise finally, but I never made it to Jim Morrison's grave. I only made it to Oscar Wilde's grave.
Right.
I need to find Maria Callas's grave, So I need to, I love Père Lachaise, so.
What prompted the move to Paris? Is it like a kind of a fresh start thing? Just wanting to do something different?
It was an accident, honestly. I finished shooting 2 big music videos, one for Top Brazil and one for Butterscotch Goddamn. And then the next day, I went to Brazil for 2 weeks with some friends of mine. This promoter from New York, Ricardo, who does a party called Harder. And so he was doing Harder parties in Brazil. And because it was like a Brazilian theme to a couple of songs on the record, I thought it was good strategy to go, and also a nice way to recover from work. So a group of us went down, and I did 2 little nightclub performances and DJ'd one night, and did a fashion editorial, shot a music video for the song O Rio. And then I raced back to New York. I packed a carry-on for 2 days and flew to Paris to just come for 2 days to see a premiere. A friend of mine, Alex Ekman, is a big choreographer, and he had a piece premiering at the Garnier. Okay. So I came in to go see his piece premiere at the Garnier. I had these incredible 2 days. I came in, I recorded with Mirwais. I, had this amazing fitting with this new designer, Ludwig, who made an evening gown for me to wear to the opera. And then I just had this kind of magical night where we had the run of the Garnier. We drank way too much champagne. We took all of our clothes off. It was a scandal. I was hungover. I had a bit of a romance, and I just woke up the next day and I didn't feel like leaving. I knew I also didn't want to be in New York for the winter. And so it was a lot of things. It was also being outside of the political climate of America felt really nice. I was out of kind of the crazy zone, not hearing about American politics all the time. And so I sort of relaxed a little bit, and my lease was coming up on my apartment, and I'm single and didn't work was kind of done. So it just weirdly was this moment where
Sounds like the planets kind of aligned and were telling you something.
yeah. And then a week later, I had decided that I was going to leave New York, and I was going to sublet my apartment, and I thought I was going to move to Madrid because I have a real strong connection to Madrid. I went to the airport and I missed my return flight right before the holidays by 5 minutes. And, I had a carry-on. It was 55 minutes before the flight. They still wouldn't let me on. So I knew when I missed that flight because I had scavenged to find a return flight, and everything was sold out and extremely expensive because it was the week before Christmas. So then I missed that flight. I went back into the city, and I went to an opening at a gallery, Boliche Hertling, and Daniele Boliche is an old friend of mine. And when I got there, he was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, well, I just missed my flight. And he was like, where are you staying? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, well, you're moving in with me. And I was like, okay. And he was like, what are you doing for dinner? And I was like, I don't have any plans. And he was like, well, you're coming to dinner. And I was like, okay. And then he said, and you're moving to Paris. And when he said it, it was like one of those moments where you're just like, oh,
I think I am.
Shit. I think, wow, you just articulated what I didn't really realize I was already thinking. And so then from there, I spent the holidays in Paris by myself, which was kind of a little lonely, but kind of amazing. Yeah, I found a room in the Marais, and I called my assistant in New York, and I had him pack up the New York apartment, and I put everything in storage, and I'm still, I came with a carry-on, and that's it.
Sounds like you've been too busy to miss New York in any way.
Yeah, I'm going back. I'm going back to New York, this week for album release. So we have 2 release parties, and there's, a lot of stuff going on. So I'll go. I miss my friends, of course, but it feels good. And I really have always wanted to speak I'm terrible. I don't speak any language other than English. And I've studied, I've taken classes, but it never really sinks in. So I know the only way I'm really going to learn French or Spanish or, any of these Romance languages is I have to be immersed in it. So this is a way for me to not be xenophobic.
You mentioned the effect that politics can have on your life. How did you feel that personally when you were in America? Did it just feel a bit claustrophobic, like you couldn't get away from it? What explain that part of the motivation.
I mean, the night of the election was, and I don't say his name because I feel like it gives it power. So I just don't say the name. But the night of the election was so traumatizing, and I was, you couldn't sleep. Yes, I felt claustrophobic. I felt like I was living in some kind of a nightmare. Like I couldn't believe this is possible. And so like panic, claustrophobic, denial. And so I was going to leave New York. Basically, I was looking for an apartment in New York last November, and I kind of decided that I was going to leave New York because it was too difficult and too expensive. And I kind of reluctantly went to look at an apartment, and it was a great apartment. And my friends were like, you really should take it. I had an appointment to meet the landlady, and it was supposed to be on the Tuesday of the election, and she slid the meeting to 11 o'clock on the Wednesday after the election. And so I was up all night long from the election, and I went to meet her, and when I went to meet the landlady to talk about the apartment, I was like, listen, I don't know why I'm meeting you. I don't know why I would rent an apartment. I don't know why I would stay in the United States. I don't know why I would stay in New York. I'm out. I got money in the bank. I can go anywhere. I was like, I'm leaving. And the landlady was very aggressive, and she was like, no, you're staying. You should stay. And I don't know if it's because she was a Polish immigrant and she had feelings about the United States but she really was very aggressive with me, and I did everything I could to not take the apartment. I was like, look, I'm an artist. I have terrible credit. I'm not going to get approved. She was like, no problem. We'll figure it out. Someone will make someone else sign something. And then she was like, the rent is X amount of dollars. I was like, I can't afford that. She's like, fine, I'll lower it, $600. I'll lower the rent. She lowered the rent. No one does that in New York. She lowered the rent. And then I even I was busy in rehearsals getting ready for a show in Mexico City. I avoided filing the application for the apartment, and she harassed me to file the application. So finally, this sweet, sweet Polish woman kind of forced me to stay in New York and rent this gorgeous apartment for one more year. And I think it was good because I needed to finish the album. I needed to finish mixing. I needed to kind of finish everything that had been in process. But, it also gave me the opportunity to, I don't know. I felt bad about leaving New York. And the thing that I deliberated was I being, disloyal or unpatriotic because I'm not there kind of fighting for the nation that America that I believe in.
Did you feel yourself and presumably yourself and other people around you really wrestling with your identity as an American post the election result?
No, because I don't think that represents America. I mean, he didn't win by the popular vote. There's a whole electoral college thing. And so the actual numbers are the majority of the United States did not vote for him. So the majority of the country is sane. I live in New York also. So New York is kind of, the more exceptional kind of land, very, mixing of cultures, and there's a lot of tolerance. And New York is such a magical place because it's this, all these extremes of like wealth and power, but also this kind of earthiness. My life in New York, I really mix with a lot of people. And so you feel that is the best kind of America. And so I have a lot of faith in kind of the ideals of democracy and American values. But a friend of mine, Kate Hardy, an artist, said something that's really stuck with me, and it's something that I'm trying to put into practice, is that I come from the South. I come from a very conservative family. They're all Trump supporters. They all voted for Trump. I said the name. See, it's bad. And my friend Kate, her mother is a judge in Texas. And Kate said to me, she said, if we can't convince our families not to vote for this person, who can we convince? So now, as we go into midterm elections, I've sort of taken it upon myself to try to figure out how to engage with my family and to have political discussions and how to convince them that when they support this administration, they're actually working against me on a very personal level.
You managed to do that without wanting to run out of the house screaming on Thanksgiving then?
Well, that is definitely, something I have done and I have to deal with, but I'm trying to change the way I connect with people who disagree with me. And so I think that's really the big lesson for me, is that to not come at it with anger and not to come with, anger's awesome. And I've been enjoying being angry and, combative and aggressive. But also, if I want to have an impact on people like my family, anger isn't the way. And so I'm trying to grow because of this situation and use this horrible experience as a way to change the way I talk about politics and change the way I relate to people that disagree with me.
Sounds like you've taken some personal positives from a not great experience, obviously. But do you think, I mean, it's very hard to talk about whether America as a whole, because you can't really speak for America, but do you think there are bigger lessons that have been learned from this or could be learned? Do you think there's any positives there in the future, or are you just still in the anger stage?
I mean, it's been exciting. I was never big into protest, and I was very passive politically. The day after the election, I went and protested, and it was the only thing that made me feel good. And it was beautiful, actually. Everyone marched up Fifth Avenue, and everyone gathered around you-know-who's hideous building. The energy was intoxicating and incredible. I had never experienced like being in that kind of a space with that kind of energy. Kind of gave me a different perspective and a renewed faith on protest. I always kind of looked at it as like, I don't know, like drudgery or like work or an obligation. I never thought of it as like therapeutic and a release and community and connection and kind of spiritual. And so, you know, that's a positive. I think it's made people really think about how to make changes and people are being more thoughtful now, I think, because if we're lazy and we're not vigilant, you end up with, you know, a situation like this. So now it feels like, oh, we've got work to do.
I'll ask you about how that feeling, that kind of proactivity that came into your own mind influenced the new album, Sir.
Yeah.
But before we do that, it's been a while since you've promoted a new album, since you've done all this, come and done the interviews and talked about yourself, etc., etc. So how does it feel to be back on that in the promotional trail, if you like?
I guess you're right. I haven't done PR in a while. I mean, it feels fine. I mean, I'm a storyteller, and so I like talking to people, and I'm not opposed to publicity, you know. And I treat it as kind of like a theater. It's also like theater and performance. So to me, press is kind of an extension of already my craft. Yeah. But also, I've learned a lot. You know, I didn't know how to create boundaries before. I didn't know how to maintain a kind of personal balance when I've gone through press before. I was actually thinking about it. It's one of the reasons why I chose to stay in Europe also is because in the past, whenever I had to do European publicity, I would have to cram it all into like a week, and it would be really difficult. And I would sort of allow publicists and managers to book up schedules, not really knowing that I could turn things down, or I didn't have to do 10 interviews a day in a different city every day for 2 weeks. I thought that I had to, in order to be successful, you know, the more I did what I was told, the better things would go. And I've kind of learned, you know, I don't know. I feel like I don't work that way anymore. I'm determined to enjoy success, because in the past I've had a lot of success and I didn't enjoy it at all.
You didn't allow yourself the time to do that, or
I guess, you know, I don't know. It's like sometimes I have a hard time taking care of myself, and I love my work, and so I'll do anything in order to be a working artist. But I found that if I don't kind of create very specific boundaries, I end up losing myself. I end up losing a personal life. I end up kind of getting too absorbed in work in a way that I don't think happens for other people that have like quote unquote real jobs. You know, when you're an artist, it's a job that can completely, you know, consume you. And so, so now I've just kind of learned, like, if there's something that doesn't get done, because there's kind of always something that's not getting done, that it's okay.
This collection of songs then, Sir, you recorded them with Michael Stipe in Athens, Georgia.
Yeah.
But where was the genesis of these songs? Did you write them a few years ago? Did you write them with Michael? Where did the process start?
It's a long and funny path, but Warren and I started working with Michael Lane Cheever, January 2013.
Okay.
First week of January. I can't remember why, but Warren asked if I wanted to work on music, and we had a rocky couple releases. Entertainment was very difficult. There was an economic collapse. We were partnered with a label that folded the month of release. So didn't go well. I was very proud of the creative, but business-wise, it was a mess. And then, and the music business was not, it wasn't working for me. So I had kind of moved on.
You're ready to step away from music?
Yeah. I mean, I was like, I was always doing other things as well. I was working with the Wooster Group, doing performance. I made a feature film called Dust. Warren and I had been working on a couple books. I did a web series for about a year, interviewing people about creativity. So I had moved on to other projects and didn't feel like fighting, kind of the lost cause of the failing music business. And also never really felt like my process fit in the music business, quote unquote, or that they could fully kind of comprehend all the facets of what I did, which was, not just music, but also film and photography and performance, and how they were all one big kind of cohesive endeavor. So anyway, I had moved on from music and was focused on other things. Warren asked me to work on a song, and I reluctantly agreed to it. And I also said, if we're going to work on music, he's famous for dragging out the process. And I was like, I'm not going to work on a record for 2 years. So, let's make a couple songs. Let's make an EP. Let's do it quickly. I'll commit to this for 6 months. That was January 2013. So then we started working, and when I went into it, I matured in a way because I knew what the record was about before I started it, which isn't always the case. A lot of times I go into writing kind of looking for what something is about. But this I knew, I don't know why, I knew I wanted to make a record about queer narratives. And I was living a really exceptional, beautiful, amazing queer life. I felt like I was having these experiences that I had never really heard about, or, had felt that they had been properly portrayed. And so I was going into it trying to make very clear queer narratives. The other thing was I knew that I wanted to change my recording kind of process, because when I work with the Wooster Group, you work on a performance, and every day in rehearsal, you're required to perform fully. So it's not a traditional kind of theater process where you kind of mark through, or you learn your lines, or, you get the costume 2 days before. When you work with the Wooster Group, you rehearse in the costume, you rehearse with full sound, with full light, and you rehearse in full focus, full character, full energy. And it seems crazy, but what it does is it really kind of elevates all the elements, and they become so interconnected. And also you really develop a kind of a stamina. It's just, it was something I wanted to bring to the recording process. And so I thought, okay, when I record, I'm not gonna, because a lot of times I would record and I write a lot on the mic, and sometimes it's more sketching and not fully committed vocally. And so I knew when I was going into record that I wanted a more committed vocal that I was delivering almost from the get-go. And those kind of two things had a big impact, I think, ultimately on the record, was like being more committed to a vocal performance, not relying on trickery, and trying to perform a song well just with a raw vocal, and then also this kind of queer narrative. And then I set about writing I would say that was about a year and a half. I worked through 2013, and then I think in the spring of 2014, I was pretty much felt that I was done. And there were 12 songs, and Michael came in the spring of 2014. There was a last song, was a track called Empty that I love, that still hasn't made it out of the studio, but a very difficult piece of music, kind of brutalist, has this big kind of booming section, and then it has another section that's very like pretty and lilting. And so it's a very interesting and extreme piece of music that Warren made, and I could not figure out how to write over it. I had Jake Shears come in, try to work on it. I had Cody Creechlow come in and try to work on it. I had a lot of people come in, and nobody could figure out how to work on this piece of music. Michael came in, and within an hour, he knew how to write over this music. And he wrote something incredible. And he had a very unique process that I had never seen, where he recorded in the room with the engineer on an SM58 with no monitors, no headphones. So he wasn't isolated in a booth. So he had like a technique. And so he instantly kind of figured out how to attack this piece of music. He was coming in to work on that track, which was supposed to be the last track on the record. And every time he was busy and traveling and this and that. And so he would come in every so often. And when he would come in, I would be working on one of the other 12 songs, doing, quote unquote, like final vocals. And so I was going through and like reperforming or editing or cleaning up or doing arrangement. And he would come in, and he would hear what I was working on, and then he would get distracted, and he would say, can I give you notes on, what was originally called, Top Brazil was originally called Grinder Blues. And he was like, can I give you notes on Grinder Blues? And I was like, sure. And so then we went through, and he got pretty aggressive, and he would really chuck out big sections and rewrite parts with me and push the melody and the performance. And he did that which was tough because I had been working on these songs for a year and a half, and I basically thought I was at the finish line. And then he was ripping them apart and rebuilding them. I think part of it was because he had disbanded R.E.M. He wasn't working in music. He was focused on visual art. But I think he couldn't resist the process. And I think also there was some kind of a freedom in it, that it wasn't him and it wasn't his moniker and it wasn't his character, and that he was able to kind of access all of his knowledge and love of music, but via me. And I kind of became a mask for him at a certain point. I mean, I would say there were stages. So anyway, he came in, he messed around on like 4 or 5 of the 12 songs, never finished the first song that he came to work on.
Okay.
And then at a certain point, I was like, do you want to get more involved formally? Do you want to, how do you want to be credited for this? Or do you, and then Warren was like, should we ask him to be the producer on the record? And I was like, I mean, maybe, I guess. And so then we asked him if he wanted to be the producer, and he said definitely no. He was like, no, I'm not. I don't work in music anymore. I am just here giving, advice as a friend. I don't expect credit. I don't expect, it was very casual and yet compulsive. Then a couple weeks later, he came back around and he said, you know what, I would consider being the producer on the record. And I said, okay. And he said, but I have to have final say on everything. And I was like, okay. And then Warren agreed to it as well. And then once we did that, then everything clicked over from him being kind of doing song doctoring as a friend. And then things got serious. And he was like, okay, I'm the producer. I have final say in everything. And then he took basically, half of the record I had written and threw them all out and was like, these songs are not going on. And I was like, okay. And then process shifted where we moved. I had been writing in this little room in New York, and Michael, we went to Athens, and we started working in Athens with Andy LeMaster. I would kind of get locked into Michael's compound, and we would go in these very intensive writing and recording sessions with Andy. Then we moved into kind of like more of a co-writing phase where Warren would send a track, and then Michael and Andy and I would write lyric and melody and do arrangement. And that went on for a year, I would say, maybe. And then while we're working on that too, my personal life is going through a lot of stuff. Like, it's almost the minute Michael kind of jumped on as producer, I started having difficulty at home. I was happily in a relationship for 14 years. And that started to kind of unravel as we were working on this latter half of the record. Mm-hmm. So not only was my time in Athens sort of a writing retreat, it was also a kind of a safe space as my personal life went into chaos. So we wrote through a lot of, we wrote through a big breakup. We wrote through the aftermath of that. There were a lot of things that happened in the next year. And so through 2015 into 2016, we continued to write. Then it kind of moved into a phase later, towards the end of the writing. Andy and Michael really, they have a very intense musical connection. And for instance, like on the song I Need Love, there used to be a point where it's like on Try Again, it'd be like I'd write a line, Michael'd write a line, Andy'd write a line, Strut, I'd write a thing, Andy'd write a thing. We kind of bounce around. And then by the time we got to I Need Love, at that point it felt like Michael had gotten so into my head and so into my world and so into my persona that he could write as me for me. And he and Andy really went into a very focused writing period on I Need Love. And there was kind of a moment where it would be like, I thought we were in our, period where we would, bounce off of each other. And Michael would write a line and then Andy would write a line. And then I'd be like, oh, I have an idea. And they'd be like, you know what? It's okay. Just smoke weed and stay in the corner. And then, they'd have an idea, and then Andy have an idea, and they'd be like, I have it. And they, you know what? So kind of as we got towards the end, which was fine because I also, a lot of great songs, the singer didn't write the song. They're songwriters that write songs for singers. And that's more of what the history of music has been. So I'm fine sitting back and having you write for me because you also know exactly what I'm saying and where I am and what I'm going through. There was kind of a moment where I stepped back, but then the last song that we wrote in kind of the most intensive period was Butterscotch Goddamn. Michael wrote almost all the words, and I wrote the majority of the melody. And they happened really fast, and like at 3 o'clock in the morning in a 1 hour period. So, so there were different phases of writing, and so that was kind of the process. And then we finished the record in February 2016. We waited and waited and waited for the record to release. We waited for the deals to come in. We waited, and it took a really long time. It was very slow. And then finally, we signed a deal in February of 2017. So for a year, I sat around waiting for the record to release, which made me absolutely crazy because also in that year, my building was sold in New York and I got evicted. So I kept losing my relationship. I lost my pets. I lost my home. I lost my mind. It was like I kept losing everything I had while working on this record. But the thing that was great was that because the record was postponed a year later than I thought, the election happened, and all of a sudden, making a queer record became way more relevant. Kind of all the delays and all the problems have paid off.
Yeah.
And I have this new motto, which is really working for me, is that I love my problems. I've got great problems. It's like, what's your problem? My record got delayed a year. That's an awesome problem. Because then the thing that was also exceptional that happened, that was a great problem that got delayed a year, is then Boots got involved. And exactly a year later from the record being finished, we ended up writing Have Fun Tonight. And that was also a big result of me getting trapped in Fire Island because I lost my home. So basically I was like a beach hobo in this gay resort. And it kind of tweaked my ear for gay culture. And I was really struck by Ariana Grande's So Into You. Yep. And so I was like, oh, I need to make like a queer version of an Ariana Grande song that's going to play, for all the queens on the floor. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Boots got involved. And then because Boots got involved, then Stuart White got involved. And then when Stuart got involved, then we redid the mixes on all the singles. So it was like, so the record took a really long time and there were a lot of problems and a lot of delays. But basically they were all exactly what needed to happen.
It's an incredible story and there's so much has happened.
Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't let you ask me, but 2 questions.
Going back to Michael Stipe briefly.
Yeah.
As you mentioned just there, your relationship during the making of the record changed as his involvement became more. He obviously was a very strong-minded producer, took a lead on the project. Have you known him long enough for that to be like okay and you trust him well enough for that to be fine, or were there moments of contention? What was that like?
Well, I mean, Michael is my first gay lover and my first boyfriend. We met in 1988 on the dance floor. He loves to say this, and I'll say it for him. He took my virginity. And so we've known each other a really long time, so we have a lot of history. It was great to work with him. He's such a amazing creative. And I mean, it was a little intense because, I was sort of trapped in his celebrity compound. And so at times it was very claustrophobic because we were working together, we were living together in this very confined environment. It was kind of like boot camp and kind of like a spa and kind of great and kind of awful because he worked crazy hours. We would work from 6 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. I wouldn't get a lot of sleep. I would usually wake up around noon. Then I would do some kind of like physical training because I had made my body a big theme. So I needed to stay in shape. So I would do Pilates or some kind of body work. And then, it'd be time to go back to the studio. And we did that, at some days, 23 days straight. And so by the time we get to like the 20th, the 22nd day, I'm not sleeping. I'm fatigued. I mean, I think it was a technique for him also because it made me super emotional and very raw. And so I think he sort of intentionally exhausted me and made me a little bit crazy because it led to better writing and a better performance.
Some master techniques coming in there.
Yeah. But also it was really interesting because, the record is about homosexuality and I'm back in the house where I had sex with a man for the first time when I was 18. And that man is the man who I'm making the record with. So the continuity of that was so crazy.
Yeah, there's like a cyclical thing to that, isn't there?
Yeah, and I'm sitting in that space and I'm thinking about like, where am I? What happened to my life? And, it's 30 years later and, what did who was I then? What am I now? What does it mean to be gay? What, it was just crazy to be able to just the air and the house and the location and to be kind of, where I was born in Athens, Georgia. And so it's like to go back to where I came from to make this thing with this person. It was magical and crazy.
This year marks 20 years, am I right in saying that Fischerspooner becomes 20 years old in 2018?
In August of 2018, I just got a chill. It will be 20 years.
Did you ever think?
No.
Okay.
Hell no. No. I mean, when we started, the idea was that it was a turn of the millennium project. It was supposed to be a one-off kind of thing that I imagined we would do a performance in New York at the stroke of midnight in the year 2000. And this was kind of the piece, this was the project that was reacting against all the kind of like fear and paranoia of Y2K. And so it was really like my Party Like It's 1999 project. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to die, you know, and everything's going to like, every computer chip isn't going to work and every elevator is going to stop and there isn't going to be any water and it's over, you know, the city is stockpiling body bags. I was like, I'm going to go out dancing in a motherfucking jockstrap covered in sweat and glitter. That was the initial impulse. So no, I was supposed to have a serious career as a gallery and museum artist. I was not supposed to be some kind of, you know, showbiz party sex clown.
Midnight Chats is a loud and quiet podcast. Production by Emma Snook. Music courtesy of Gold Panda. Search Midnight Chats on iTunes for more episodes and to subscribe. For more information, visit loudandquiet.com.